Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by CoolStuffInc, where you can get cool stuff and get a 5% discount with my code. Coalesce Apparel, where you can get really cool Magic t-shirts and stuff and get 10% off with my code. And then Archidekt, where you just post decks and I don't really have a code. But it's okay, they like me and I like them, and that kind of works out. Today is a super special episode. This is my 98th episode of this show, which is wild to think about. And I have got a guest I've been trying to get since, or at least thinking heavily about trying to get since episode 1. Reid Duke, probably my favorite pro player of all time. And the reason I'm actually sitting here in front of all you guys with this podcast and, like, I guess 10 years of career in Magic now. But we'll get to that in a minute because that's more fun when I talk to him and not to you. So, hello, Reid. Thank you so much for making time to join me today.
Hey, Shivam, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you. Yeah, thanks for making it happen. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just lay it out because I did just tease that. Basically, if anybody's been listening to my show, you guys know that the most pivotal event for me was Worlds 2011, which was in San Francisco, which was the same event where I came back, where the professor came back, where a whole bunch of people who we know as Magic content community creators came back to the game to start just playing and re-exploring Magic again. It was like right when Innistrad had come out. And wow, you've got an adorable cat, man. That's like just so funny right now.
Yeah, I'm
And
actually not sure what kind of video component
there's
you have
none.
here, but if anybody's hearing strange sounds on my microphone, this is my brand new kitten. I also just moved recently, so I don't have my normal setup. But thanks for being patient with me, and I'm sure he'll tire himself out and go to sleep
That's
in a few
adorable.
minutes.
Hopefully, it won't chew through your microphone cable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what happened was like Duels of the Planeswalkers come out, and everybody gotten back into Magic, and I was like, oh, I'm unemployed, and there's a big Magic event in town. I'll go see what it is. And I had never gone to a big Magic event before. And mind you, I've just come back to the game. I've been like to one pre-release maybe. I've got a dual deck. That's like literally my content. And I go there, and if you remember, they had $5 drafts at that event. And I was like, what the hell? I'm here on Wednesday, I'll draft. And when you're drafting with Team Japan and Team Finland, because who's else is going to be drafting at a Wednesday at World? It's like, oh, I'm getting my ass kicked by people who are
Yeah,
just
you're in
like,
the shark's den.
yeah, it's like, hey, these guys are practicing for the actual tournament, and I've never held a card before, and I'm just like, oh, what do I do with these things? But I played a lot of those, and I got thrashed a lot because obviously, when you're playing with Hall of Famers, you're going to get beaten. And either Wednesday or Thursday night of that week, I decided to sign up at like late night for one of the last. I think it was a draft that they were doing, and I was like, no, not a draft. It was a sealed event. It was one of the last sealed events they were doing that night. I built my deck and I just got smacked. And for 2 days or something, I'd just been getting my, tuck is kicked up and down the street. And I'm like, maybe Magic isn't for me. Maybe I just need to be like, hey, you know what? This was a fun like reminder of what it was like when I was a kid. I'll go back to video games now. I'm good to go. And I was telling my opponent who just beat me, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to call it a day because I don't know how to do this. And my opponent said, hey, hang on, let me look at your deck. And he did, and said, "You've got good cards here. Take these out, put these in, and rebalance your land. And here's what a mana curve is. Here's how to put creatures." And I'm like, "Oh wow!" And then I won my next game, and I was like, "All right, I'm doing this forever." And now I'm sitting here running Commander. So, thank you, Reid, because you took the time when you didn't have to after a match. You could have just like picked up your cards and walked off like we normally do, but instead you stopped and you showed me how to actually do this, and that encouragement was enough for me to be like, okay, well, let's see what this is like. And from there, I'm now 10 years, like, I mean, I started playing in the dark, and so like I had a long gap and I came back, but then I went hardcore, and now I'm one of the, like, because of your like timely intervention, I have now become somebody who's now got 100 episodes of a podcast and like runs one of the largest casual formats in the game. So
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I really appreciate you sharing that and even remembering it in the first place. I'm a person like I really believe in the value of small kindnesses, treating people around you with respect, or giving someone that extra moment of your time or attention. And a lot of times when you do that, like, you never hear about it or think about it again. But with this story, it's really awesome to see how, like, a tiny seed was planted, and had the ripple effect of you staying in Magic, and now you've had such a positive influence on your listeners and so many other people. So yeah, it's just great
Yeah,
to
I
think
mean,
about that, and realize how those things do add up.
yeah, I mean, I've used your example of being kind to your opponents, of being able to, like, stop and help other players, um, because of the fact that, like, in my own, like, experience as a Magic player, because those small gestures are the difference between somebody coming in, playing once and never coming back, or you having an opponent that's now forever in the game. And as, like, part of, like, the social contract of Magic just in general, helping other people become players, or just giving them that kind hit when they're getting, like, having a bad time, is so important to what makes our game great, because it's these social connections that we have that keeps people coming back. And you have been such a good example of that at such a high level of play, where, like, one of the things about, like, you see from super, like, tournament level spiky like, very, like, top end competitive players, is there's a lot of very quiet stoic faces, no talking, no emotion, kind of, almost. And you pick up your cards, win or lose, shake their hand and go home, but you don't see those kind of, like, softer touches of, like, "Hey, let me at least, like, give you a bit of, like, welcoming or kindness in order to help you up." And it's so important to model that kind of behavior. So I really appreciate the kind of example that you've been setting for the community overall.
Yeah, thank you. As especially as I became a pro player and somebody who was a little bit more known, and sometimes my opponents would recognize me in advance of the match, it became, like, very important for me that people have a good experience when they play against me. And
Hmm.
I'm going to play hard, of course. I'm not going to let
Sure.
anybody beat me, but I do want.
Okay, so we had a bit of a brief hiccup. Maybe Reed's cat got a little closer to those video cables than we expected. But again, though, it's, like, really gratifying to me to see how you comport yourself as a player. I think you set a really great example for people, and it's really cool to just watch, like, especially, like, one of my favorite coverage moments ever was GP Richmond, which we all called GP Reedman, when they sat and taped your entire, like, experience with that. And I want to talk about that, because that was, like, one of the wildest things I've ever seen, and it must have been absolutely exhausting for you. But also watching how you comported yourself with all your opponents as you played through was just, like, over and over again. It was, like, just so cool, because you were so even. You were even with, like, judge calls, even with things that weren't going your way. You never lost your level, and I think that's one of those things that's just really important for people who get tilted really easily to kind of take lessons from. What was that like for you to sit and have to, like, both tape your every game and also have to do commentary at the same time?
Well, it was definitely exhausting. I think the stars kind of aligned for that to be the perfect event,
Mm,
which I can get into in a moment. But I did want to say, like, that I agree with you. I thought that was a really cool project because a lot of folks, know about tournament magic, and maybe they've even watched tournament magic, but that doesn't necessarily give you the whole picture of what it's actually going to be like to play in a tournament. So getting that sort of over the shoulder camera view and access to the microphone, including the small
mm,
talk between the players and the interactions with the judges, I think that gave people, a bit more insight about what it can be like to actually experience a full tournament. So that was Grand Prix Richmond, as you mentioned. And yeah, from my perspective, it was a whirlwind for sure. I had originally been scheduled to be part of the coverage team for that event, but it came to pass that it was one of the last events of the season, and I actually, like, really needed another good finish
yeah.
for my end of the year ranking. So I called up. It was Rich Hagon at the time was in charge of the coverage, and I was like, "Hey, Rich, I'm really sorry. to back out. But is there any way that you could get a replacement for me for the coverage team so that I could play in the event? And Rich, being Rich, said, "Well, Reid, I could definitely do that for you. Or here's this other idea." And yeah, I was really grateful that the coverage team and the judge staff and the viewers and everybody involved was able to accommodate me and let me do both
Yeah,
the
but didn't you stop to
play
think like
and do coverage.
didn't it occur to you guys that, hey, wait, this is like one of the most important tournaments you have to play. It's going to be insane for you to have to do double duty of both like playing the game and doing coverage at the same time?
Yeah, it was hard. It was a lot, but it's also it's pretty cool to be able to have your cake and eat it too in that sense because I
That's true.
love everything about a Magic tournament is awesome for me, including several different opportunities for me to work or
Sure.
be productive at the event. So normally you have to pick between am I going to compete or am I going to be on coverage or am I going to work or am I going to hang out and see my friends? So being able to just cram as much into one tournament weekend is actually something that's pretty appealing, even though it did wind up being uh, fairly exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, because from my perspective as a viewer, it was fantastic. It was one of the coolest things ever because it was a legacy event. So those are like a whole bunch of decks you don't get to see very often. And then on top of that, there was that tension of you trying to get the player of the year or whatever it was that year. And so we had like a deep investment in how good you were doing. And periodically, didn't you also like just commentate on like your own matches at some point?
Yeah, I think they had me come in to the booth. It was every other round
Yeah,
as soon as I had finished my own match, and then sometimes we go back and talk over some of the key turns in my own match. Sometimes I would cover somebody
that's
else
so
who's in the
wild.
feature match area. But yeah, it was great stuff. It was kind of the coverage dream, I would say. Everything from the clear narrative to the excitement, and it we could have planned that whole project in depth, and then I could have been out after 2 or 3 rounds. But it was
Yeah,
just fortunate that happened, and I was relevant in the tournament right to the last round in Swiss.
that was so wild to me, like, because I was thinking about that the whole time too, like, "Oh, wow, you could have just gotten shellacked in the first couple of rounds, and that would have just been the end of the story." But you went, like, almost all I mean, you nearly made it, and we were, like, at the edge of our seats. I don't think I've ever watched coverage for a tournament that intently before, and it felt like watching a, like, Super Bowl or a sporting match or something where you're watching and just, rooting and just cheering this dude on, and yeah, it was heartbreaking, but it was also amazing at the same time.
Yeah, I think that was a highlight of Magic coverage in some ways,
Yeah.
and I've had a lot of people give me that feedback that they really enjoyed that event, like particularly.
I want to pull back a couple steps and I want to ask you a little bit about what it's like to be a real hard, like at your level of pro Magic player. Because we met at Vegas a few weeks ago, which was both like fantastic. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what it felt like to be back in a room full of Magic players again. Because for me, it was just overwhelming happiness to just see like all of our people in one place, just doing the thing that we love so much. And I'm curious what it felt like for you since you were actually playing in the big main event.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was everything that I had hoped for. Just getting to get back out there and
Mm,
see people, old friends, meet some new people who'd maybe watched me stream or read my
yeah.
articles in the last couple of years, and then yeah, just have a good time playing Magic. It's everything that I'd hoped for. I thought the event was a big success.
Yeah, it was amazing to me how many people came out. Like, there were way more people that I mean, I knew a lot of people were gonna come because obviously the entire casual community decided to up and come there. But I saw, like, Japanese players, and I saw, like, Shahar and all these other just, like Ben Sek was there, and just, like, tons and tons of random pros were just showing up. I think everybody had just been jonesing really, really hard for in-person Magic again after so long, and it was just neat.
Yeah, I think so too. I had fun watching Shuhei Nakamura play,
Yeah.
which if any viewers or listeners are not familiar with him, he's famous for basically having the most volume of professional matches played. Like he's been at it almost since the beginning of Magic back in the '90s, and he's just gone to every single Grand Prix that he could all over the world, and he's an amazing player too. But he just can't miss a limited steel deck booster draft Grand Prix, and there he was in Las Vegas. Some things never change.
That's exactly it. That's exactly who I was thinking about because I saw him there and I was like, what the hell is Shuhei doing here? How did he get here? I thought there were like, travel restrictions, but of course, if there's a tournament, he's not going to miss that tournament, period, ever. And it was so it felt like that was one of those like mimetic moments of like nature is healing. Shuhei is back playing a Grand Prix. Let's go with it.
Yeah, totally.
It's funny you mentioned Shuhei because at the event in 2011, he was nominated and that's when he became a Hall of Famer. That's when he got his ceremony. And I know this because I was in a draft with him and Team Japan, and he had to get up and leave our draft to go get his ring. So that's when I knew I was
Wow,
out of my
that's
league.
pretty special.
Yeah, it was amazing because he's decked up in the kimono and everything. It was so cool. Um, Man, 2011, what an event that was. You were the Magic Online champion that year.
Yeah, that was definitely
Wasn't that like your breakout year?
that was a fairy tale event for me as well because it was the last event of the season, and I had we'll call it a middle finish in the World Championship itself, but that, by the way, was way, way massively better than I'd ever done in a pro tour up to that point. Was to have a middle finish. Most of the time, I got sent packing,
Mm,
but that middle finish was enough to get me. At the time, it was called Level 4 in the Pro Players Club, and
hmm.
that qualified me for the Pro Tours the following year. So in that sense,
Nice.
I was able to keep playing, and as you mentioned, I won the Magic Online Championship, which was huge for me. And it was kind of the first time I'd ever made money playing Magic or made a significant amount of money.
Hmm.
And so I had now suddenly, from being not sure if that was going to be my last Magic tournament ever, suddenly I had qualifications for the future events and I had the resources to travel and compete. So that was kind of a big turning point for me, that event in 2011.
Man, that's sweet. Like getting on the train when there was a train to get on, and right at like the peak of real, like that after that event, I think Magic really just took off in terms of both organized play and coverage, and like just having like matches and tournaments, and like the audience really just blew up after that because Innistrad won, obviously one of the greatest sets of all time. Um, but let's go back a step and all the way. So I know you learned how to play Magic with your brother, who is currently at WotC, which is another story unto itself. But how did you get into like tournament play?
Um, okay, so yeah, I was very young when I learned Magic. My brother
Didn't you guys
Ian
like
was
pick up an Ice
10.
Age
I
booster or
was I
something?
was 5. Yeah, it was
5?
1995. That was Ice Age in fourth edition.
Jeez.
Were the sets out at the time, and we played just between amongst ourselves on the bedroom floor for a handful of years, and then eventually we discovered the local store scene,
Mm,
and um, where am I going with this? Yeah, I guess I had played some local events, and it was mostly in like Invasion
mm,
era when I found a new local store, or actually the same local store had closed down and then reopened.
sure.
And I started going to the tournaments every Sunday, or I think they had every other Sunday, two events per month.
Mm,
And yeah, I was always a pretty good player in terms of my ability to like sit down and play a good game and navigate the combat steps well and all that. And I just really enjoyed it and wanted to play more and more. And eventually, when I was in college, I got into Magic Online, and that was opened a whole new door of like being able to play against opponents from all over the world at all hours of the day. And yeah,
I
just could never get enough.
Yeah, dude. I'm glad that Magic Online came out during my break from Magic because otherwise I don't think I would have graduated college.
Right. Yeah, I remember, some late nights, and you would like you'd get a bad beat in a draft, and you'd be like, oh, well, I can't go to sleep now. I got to do one more. Then one more becomes one more becomes one more, and before you know it, it's like 4 a.m. and you have to get up for your 7 o'clock class.
God, that yeah, no, no, thank you. I know what that world was like. Because it's funny, like if you listen to Receivables, you see like Cedric talking about his era in college, and he's like, "Yeah, I had a test the next day, but instead I decided to fly out to Cleveland for a PTQ." And I'm like, "Oh no, this is bad." Um, but what did you do in college?
Um, like, what did I study?
Yeah, what did you study?
I studied economics.
Hmm. And yet you still play Magic.
Yeah, um, not always the best financial decisions, but I love it, and lots of people get really into their hobbies, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I mean, you're talking to me, man. I know the feeling. I could build a room out of all the commander decks I have right now. Um, so you really just were a hardcore grinder on MitGo for a very long time, and I know that like because I remember hearing about your stories back when I was because I used to read about Magic more than I would play it, and so obviously we would pay attention to who's going where. And after that, like 2011, when you really started just going to tournaments and putting up finishes and stuff, um, what was it like? How did you kind of like deal with the fact that you have to fly around the world or have to keep like updating your metagame decks? Like, what is that nitty gritty life of like the tournament grinder like? Because I remember seeing you at things like SCGs or at GP random places all the time, and it must have been just really draining. Like, what do you do when you're living that life day to day? Like, what do you do during the week? You know?
Well, I'll start by saying you have to love it,
Mm,
because you need to really be passionate in order to get home on a late on a Monday night and have just a couple of days to do your laundry and get your work done, and that's not even to mention practice
right.
for the next tournament, and then get up again and get on a plane on Friday to go play again. But I always felt really, really fortunate to be able to do that and live that lifestyle. And of course, I love Magic
Mm,
pretty much more than ever anything. And there's also some element of playing all the tournaments like helps keep you sharp.
mm,
And tournament experience itself is, I find, really good and kind of irreplaceable.
yeah.
To help you learn and grow as a player. So I think it's good. I'm not sure if I would want to do that today. Now I'm 32 years old and have
It's a
like some
young man's
extra,
game.
yeah, extra responsibilities and things like that. And it's like you get out of the car after the long car ride and your back hurts and you don't want to, you don't want to sleep on the floor of the hotel room anymore. All that
No, sir.
stuff. It's cool to have that experience for a little while. And these days, I'm happier if I play, a tournament every month or every 3 weeks or something like
Mm,
that, where you can kind of give a little bit more attention and do it with more quality and not have
right.
everything be so hectic. But yeah, those years were really fun in their own way, and I wouldn't trade it.
Well, yeah, because it's super exciting. You know, you go week to week, you see your friends in another random convention center somewhere. It doesn't even matter. You got to drinking the same sodas, going to the hotel rooms until like late at night and looking at the meta games and trying to figure out what happened last week, what's going to happen next week, how do I beat these guys today? And it's so much fun to like that camaraderie, especially when you're younger and have the energy to be able to do that. It's just joy. It's like the best part of all of this. And then you hit like your 30s, and I don't know about you, but I was thinking about driving to Las Vegas, and I'm like, I am not driving 9 hours and then 9 hours back after a tournament so that I can go and spend the weekend not sleeping because I'm not 20 anymore. Um, and it's just it's crazy to think about, especially now with like so much of the stuff going online and all of the tournaments in the past 2 years being just like all arena stuff. Um, do you think that's changed the way you approach Magic? The fact that everything is now like just digital?
Yeah, it's changed a lot in a lot of different ways. I think. Well, I'm glad that I had the background of having played a lot of competitive events on Magic Online back in the
Mm.
old days,
Ah, yeah.
because my philosophy for these play from home online tournaments is that you really want to create an environment where you can be at your most comfortable and play your best.
Mm.
And even if it's not a tournament, that's true for anybody who's playing pickup games of Arena or Magic Online or whatever it might be. Like there's it's one thing to just fire up a game and play for fun, and I totally do that often. But if you do want to cultivate that environment where, hey, the TV's not on the background, and I'm in a quiet room with the door closed, and there's not a lot of clutter on my desk. I don't have music playing. Like creating an environment where you can really focus, and
Mm.
sometimes those details are different for different people, and you have to feel it out and create your own space. But I think that's the key, and
Yeah,
you
'cause
see sometimes, like, for example, I played a big event this past weekend, and
yeah,
the most successful players were the team from Japan, who
yeah,
were playing in the most extreme time zone disadvantage that you can imagine, playing the last events of the day at
like
8
7 in the
9
morning.
a.m. local time after having been up all night. It really takes like a special, not only a special kind of person, but it takes um, dedication to be able to set yourself up for success under those conditions.
That was so insane to me because I was watching that, the Innistrad Championship as well, and when you're watching these guys play, like, Golgari Food, which is not an easy deck to play, especially with all the triggers and everything going on, and it's just like, these guys are doing this at 4 or 5, 6 in the morning. They have to grind through, like, the same 12, 15, whatever, however many 3 days of rounds there are, and they have to sit there with this complicated deck at the wrong side of the day, deep into the night, and then when they made it into like the top 8 and they're like, oh god, we have to grind again. Like between them and even Simon Gertzen, who is in Germany, or like, I mean, sorry, in Europe, who's also on like the wrong side of a timeline of time zone, which is made for like us Americans here. It was just nuts to think about, like, man, poor Ichikawa is like up at like dawn trying to play this magic deck, and it's completely nuts that he was able to win. And it was, I mean, it was beautiful. I love that deck. But damn, I can't imagine the kind of like discipline it takes to be able to stay awake and stay focused and sharp when you're trying to do this like at 11 o'clock at night or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
staying sharp. That's exactly the word for it. 'Cause you have to play. You have to play good. You have to play fast. And if you're making 2,000 decisions and 2,000 clicks in a game of Magic, it only takes a couple of those to go wrong before suddenly a game can slip out of your hands. And
Oh god, that
at
too.
the highest level of competition, you have to really work to make sure that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. What deck did you play this weekend?
I played Is It Epiphany in Standard, and I
Mm,
played a Rakdos Dreadhorde Arcanist deck in Historic.
those were cool looking decks too. I'm well, Epiphany. I'm well into over Epiphany. I think everybody is, but
Yeah.
I love that Rakdos deck. I think it's really neat. Um, God, Epiphany. I hate extra turn cards, and I've been begging WotC to not do anymore, and they keep doing them. And I'm like, "You're ruining Commander." And they're like, "Yeah, well, deal with it." I'm like, "Guys, stop." But Epiphany, man, what a dumb card. But anyways, um, I know one thing you've been picking up since like there's been a lot of instability with organized play, as we know. Like it's just been kind of disappearing over the years. And I've seen that you've picked up a lot of slack with both your articles and with like daily streams and YouTube content and stuff like that. And that's really hard to do unless you're like a, a Reid Duke who's got a built-in audience that can come in there. Um, have you found the transition to trying to be more of a content creator a difficult one?
Yes and no. Um, I mean, a lot of this had to do with the pandemic too,
Right.
where a lot of for a lot of people, a lot of job opportunities were closed off and travel opportunities, and I felt really really lucky that I had this work that I could do from home.
Hmm.
Even though I was, of course, disappointed to not be traveling and that all the in person events had to be canceled, I was like counting my blessings that okay, well, I can still engage with Magic. I can still, work in a way that I don't have a financial emergency on my hands, and that's really cool. And as you mentioned, I'm also in a unique position since I've been around for so long, and I have this audience that I feel like I can dart around a little bit. Like, for example, um, I can take a few weeks off from streaming if that's what's best for my schedule, and then pick up my stream again. And I still have a dedicated crew of followers who will probably tune in,
Mm,
and that's really special because something that I think many viewers don't appreciate or have a grasp of is how much work content
mhm.
creators have to front load before,
Yeah.
like you could just tune in and check out a couple of the most successful content creators with the biggest following, and you go, oh wow, they've got it made, right? Like they make all this money and they're so famous and successful, and this and that, but you don't see that people have to work for weeks, months, years, sometimes with very little return in order to build that audience and get their quality under control. Uh, but yeah, having starting from a position where I was already pretty established in the community and had these resources and these avenues that I could follow was something that I was really grateful for.
Yeah, because I know that I've seen a lot of like, people try to get into because again, pandemic, we had nothing else to do, and Magic players like, well, I can play Magic, so I'm going to do that. And you see these people who are just like really well known, really, well known pros or just big names in the community or whatever, trying to get into the stream, and they've got like two, four, five followers or people watching their streams, and it is so difficult to break in when there's so many of us trying to do this sort of thing. And, I don't know, it's a real challenge. Because I was even talking to Marshall about that, about how with the, like, pandemic and with the reconfiguration of, like, what it means to do Magic coverage or just play Magic professionally anymore. How do we shift ourselves to this new kind of format? And it's a weird world out there, and I hope that WotC figures something out, and I hope the pandemic kind of solves itself so that we can get back to being able to do this for fun. But, 'cause it's real hard when this becomes your livelihood and you have to, like, keep a stream up or your podcast or whatever it is, and try to make sure that you can pay your rent every month, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you. The way I see it, like, it's always going to be hard, whether you're talking about being at the top of competitive play or at the top of content creation in whatever form that takes. It's always going to be hard because there's a lot of people who love Magic and want to be in that position, and
yeah.
in some ways you have to fight for it.
Mm,
But it's really what I think is the most important is that those opportunities be out there and that
yeah,
everyone have a fair chance of doing it, of achieving it if they're willing to put in the work.
exactly. It's a very it feels very equalizing, almost like a GP with sealed, right? Like, everybody's got the same pile of packs, good luck, go. Um, so one thing that actually, and this is a little bit more frivolous though, and I'm very interested to hear this. I saw you in person and you are thin as a rail and goddamn fit, and I don't understand it. We play Magic all day and we've been in a pandemic for like 2 years. How are you still like healthy? I don't understand. What do you do? Like, how do you stay so freaking fit?
Oh well, if, I'll start by taking that as a compliment. Thank you. It's in some ways been easier for me personally with the pandemic because the times when I felt like my health and fitness were slipping the most is when I just had that frequent travel where
Mm,
it's like, okay, you're on a bad sleep schedule, you can't control what you're eating as well, you don't find time to exercise. But I tend to like kind of thrive when I'm able to get into a routine and a schedule. So just having this like daily routine where I'd get up, eat a good breakfast, maybe do some
mm,
streaming or some writing, and then in the afternoon go for a run or play sports or do whatever workout I could fit in. That works well for me. Um, but yeah, I just find okay, if you want the Reid Duke workout tip, the most important thing I think is just getting into a schedule where you have realistic expectations of yourself
mm,
and can stick to it.
mm.
And I've certainly been there at various points in my life where I go like, okay, I'm gonna be like this amazing like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Brad Pitt, or whatever. Like I'm gonna look great. I'm gonna be so fit. I'm gonna be the world's strongest man. And then you work at it for 2 or 3 days or a week or whatever, and then it just is not sustainable. And you have a bad day where you can't get out and do your workout, or you can't stick to your really
Mm, mm.
restrictive diet, and then you give up and that's not good for anybody. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to set reasonable expectations where you're like, okay, one thing for me is I never spend more than an hour, and usually it's much less than that, doing a workout. And
Mm,
the reason is that if I try to do 90 minutes or 2 hours in the gym or whatever, that's just going to be the first thing to go when my schedule gets hectic.
mm.
And I would much rather have the more reasonable, realistic expectations and be able to stick with it rather than push myself harder than is humanly possible. So that's my secret, is just, you know,
Discipline,
be
discipline and focus.
reasonable, be reasonable, and set expectations that you can stick with.
Mm. Yeah, because I remember hearing from like when you guys are when various pros have gone on like limited resource or whatever to talk about tournaments, how you guys are sitting there like we have to sit and play Magic for like 8, 10 hours straight. So if your mind's not sharp and your body's not healthy, you're going to fail out of that tournament just from health, right? Just from your
Definitely, that's
exhaustion.
definitely true. And yeah, circling back to, I was talking about this in the context of online play, but it's
Mm,
really important for tabletop play too. Is create that environment where you can feel good, where you can perform your best. So, as you alluded to, the stamina of playing for a long day, and um, I always liked to, do a little bit of like stretching in the morning so that I would feel
mm.
good sitting in those chairs and not be bothered by like back pain or tightness or whatever it might be. So again, just it's going to be different for everybody, but creating that environment where you can feel good.
I definitely did not miss tournament chairs, let me tell you.
No.
Going to Las Vegas and playing on those like crappy tables with those garbage chairs, I was like, if not for the people here, this would suck. But wow, tournaments were very different. What was it? I mean, I hate. I mean, I feel like I'm jumping around, but that's also kind of just what I do. Is I jump around when a thought occurs to me. And the chairs triggered a mind thought that when I was talking to people who were playing in Vegas, and they were like, "Yeah, the first round was complete garbage for everybody because people had forgotten how to play in paper. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
need to pay for Luris. Luris comes to my hand and then goes to play. It doesn't just jump in. Or, I forgot how to shuffle my deck, or any of these other things that we've just like muscle memories that have atrophied after 2 years of sitting around. What did you find the physical experience of playing Magic in an actual tournament setting like again after so long?
Uh, that's a great question. And I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is I personally had a pretty rough start to the tournament because what happened was, I hadn't like kept my collection up to date. So
Oh,
we were gonna play modern in Vegas, but I didn't own any of the cards that had been printed in the last like 3 years, right? Because I just hadn't been
sure.
playing paper Magic. So I show up in the morning and I have to go around to like 10 or 12 different dealer booths, piecemealing the
Oh
cards to complete
no.
my deck. And then I finally do, I'm able to build my deck. And I walk up to the judges station, like the tournament desk, and I'm like, okay, like, can I have my deck list now? I'm ready to fill it out. And they're like, okay, there's no deck list. You have to fill it out via, via mobile, or, the online deck submission form. So I'm there on my smartphone, click like poking away at my screen. I have no internet. I'm like making errors, and I'm scrambling at 8:56 to get my deck submitted for 9 o'clock.
Oh
So
no.
anyway, that was like a little bit of a headache right at the start. But yeah, there's certainly some growing pains, and playing paper Magic, especially in a tournament setting. You can sort of take it for granted when you're playing all the time, but there is a lot to it. It's pretty
Yeah.
challenging, and especially trying to finish matches,
There's no
in
timer
50
anymore.
minutes can be tough. I also played the modern deck I picked was Golgari Yawgmoth combo, which is pretty intricate. There's a lot going on when you. The idea is that you're gonna do like a combo loop with undying creatures, putting
Mm.
+1/+1 counters on, and then
Oh god.
removing them with -1/-1 counters with Yawgmoth. Anyway, there's a lot to it,
It's very
and
fiddly deck.
I was like, my philosophy was just like, okay, let's take it really slow, make sure I don't get ahead of myself, so that I'm not tripping over my own shoelaces when I'm trying to do this. And I eventually, the deeper into the tournament, you sort of get in the zone and
Well,
you
yeah.
get your habits down. But it was tough. It was tough getting back into paper
That's
magic in that
funny that
sense.
you would choose such a wildly intricate and, like, technically fiddly deck to play for your first return. I thought you would have chosen something like Elves, which is like, like the back of your hands, and you can just throw down and just play kind of on autopilot to refresh. But no, Reid Duke's gotta be different, and so you've gotta go and just jump in with a bag full of dice and good luck.
Yeah, leave it to me. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun, and it was fun, but it was it was also a lot.
Y yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was gonna pull out my modern deck because I was thinking maybe I would go and play some side events or something, and my deck was like, you know, 4 or 5 years out of date and, like, no Modern Horizon cards, no, like, I would have brought it there and just gotten, like, wrecked for a meta game that did not exist anymore because it's not Ragavan, good luck, but it was super fun to watch people play Modern again, like, or even just drafting. It was drafting in person. I forgot how much I missed seeing that.
Hmm.
Like, it felt good. Did you try to do the main event? How did you do in the tournament?
I made day two of the modern, which I ended up finishing like one win outside of the top eight,
Oh, damn.
something like 12th place or something. But that did mean missing the limited and main event, which on the one hand, I was looking forward to the limited. On the other hand, it's great to be able to make day two of the modern.
Yeah.
But yeah, in person limited is really cool, and I made sure to do a side draft on Sunday. And
Yeah, I got lucky on Sunday. I got invited to do a powered cube. That was the last
very
event I
good.
did in Vegas, and my deck had 2 Moxes in it. My first pick was Mana Drain, and it was just a blue-black miserable pile of, like, "You don't get to do anything, and I will take all your cards."
Sounds
And,
awesome.
oh
Sounds
my
like my
god.
kind of magic.
It's like the least me deck I've ever seen because 'cause I'm a turn things sideways kinda guy, but it feels really good to Mana Drain someone's Soul Ring. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like, you don't need that, but I'll take it, sure. Or, I don't know, that deck was it had Urza in it, and it was
nice.
gross. It was absolutely disgusting.
Yeah,
Um,
mana drain is an experience that everybody should have at least once.
right? Like, there's something about turn 1 opening your hand and being like, there's like, you know, I can just go turn 1 Ursa, and then you feel really, really good about life, and then tinker into a Blightsteel, and it's like, the world's your oyster. Um, yeah, that was a good way to end Vegas, let me tell you, to be able to sit and power cube in paper. I've never gotten to do that before, and it's weird holding actual Moxes. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just so used to digital, but it's like, this is an alpha Mox, what do I do? Um, yeah, it was wild. Man, so I'm curious, when you became a Hall of Famer, like, when you got into the hall, I know you were, like, the last inductee, weren't you? Or one of the last ones?
Yeah, that's right. The Hall of Fame went on hiatus after my year.
I'm glad you made it in before the cutoff because that was a real sad event for us to lose because the Hall of Fame is always just such a cool thing. Um, it's just such a meaningful to, like, the top level, players, and just to also see your favorite players get up there into this thing and just being able to see, like, John Finkel come back over and over again to play because he's got the Hall of Famer invite and just show up and win again. It was cool. So, what did it feel like to you to actually be able to get up there to the pinnacle of the position and be able
Well,
to make it,
it meant an awful lot to me, and yeah, I'm just really grateful to have had the opportunity and also to get the vote of confidence, from the Magic community that it represents.
Mm,
But I have I've followed the Pro Tour for a long time, long before I ever got to play, and
yeah.
I've always sort of been a nerd for Magic's history and watching all these great players, and so it was just a great experience for me to like grow up watching these people and then
Mm,
get on the Pro Tour and get to meet some of them and then transitioned into actually being a part of Magic's history in my own way. I
I
think
think it's amazing.
Magic is just something really special in that we get to have that history and that continuity.
Yeah, I think it was so cool to be able, like, it must be so amazing to, like, join the ranks of people like Finkel or like Kai Buddha or any of these, like, Paulo Vitor Damarosa, who you played 1,000,001 times, but still to be able to sit there and be like, yo, we're Hall of Famers. That's a incredible feeling. And I think everybody in the community at least was very happy to see you make it because it felt like a good capstone if we had to, and I'm sad that we had to have a capstone for that. I hope Wizards figures their stuff out because this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
I hope so too. I think there's at least some people in Wizards of the Coast that are like passionate about returning the Hall of Fame in whatever form,
mm,
possibly even in an expanded form. But we'll just, I
yeah,
guess,
because
have to wait and see exactly if
let's be
that comes to
honest,
pass and when and how.
Brian David Marshall needs to be in whatever the Hall of Fame is.
I
Like
think so too. Yeah.
that's one of those things where I'm just like, this is not right. That one of the most important people in Magic is not being honored in some way. Like he's he's BDM. He's like the reason so many of us have this ability, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's actually kind of funny because the official title of the Hall of Fame is the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Fame.
yeah,
But at this point, like, it's almost 2022. Like we've gone past that. Like Magic is the Pro Tour is still awesome, and that's a really rich part of our history. But like we've also gone past that, and
yeah,
Magic is so much bigger, and there's so many other like names in Magic that
yeah.
mean so much to so many people that yeah, like let's do it and let's expand things and give
Give the people
and
the
get this
laudits that they
opportunity
do.
to celebrate like the folks that are worth celebrating in Magic.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that like folks like Sheldon Menery, who created Commander and was one of the greatest judges of all time, isn't in the Pro Tour Hall of Fame, right? Like, or like BDM or Hagon. Hagon's done so much for the game. Or like, I mean, there's so many names and faces of people who are outside of that tournament play kind of environment that have done so much for the game. But that's me going to be yelling at like Wizards and not at poor Reid over here. But I have a question for you because your brother Ian has been like lead developer at WotC for a long time, or I don't know what he does now, but he's been there in the capacity of like making cards for a very long time. And has it been weird for you when you've been like a tournament grinder to not have conversations with him about like Magic cards?
Yeah, it was definitely weird at first because my brother and I grew up playing together, and we even traveled to tournaments together for the first handful of years that I was doing that. And we also had this routine. I remember that when like the card gallery, the previews would come out for a new set, we would like sit down together and go over the cards and like, oh, this one looks cool. I want to build a deck with this and make jokes and evaluate the stuff, talk about what's going to be good in booster draft. And then suddenly it was like, well, we can't do that anymore because my brother worked on these cards, and also it would just we're sort of starting from different
Mm,
levels when it comes to evaluating the cards because he's been involved so much. So we still like to talk about Magic when we can. It just takes a much different form. Like I'll hopefully see him around the holidays this year, and I'm sure he'll ask me like, oh, what did you think of this set and this announcement and what's going on with organized play, and he sort of likes to get my player perspective, and
mm.
I like to get his Wizards of the Coast perspective. But we talk about things in much different ways now, and on a much different timeline also.
Yeah. So it's more about talking about like sets that are already well and done instead of things that would be coming out. Because I remember I talked to him once and he told me that you two had tried to play Commander early on and ended up making like just really heinous, super
Yeah,
spiky blue black decks or something. Was that right?
that's exactly right. Yeah, we built commander decks. I think at the time it was still EDH,
Yeah.
and we're like, oh yeah, like this sounds cool. We spent a couple hours each building our decks. Sort of went into the lab in separate rooms, and we came out, and I had mono black with braids as my
Oh God.
commander, like every discard spell and sinkhole, and like you said earlier, like let's just make it so the opponent can't play Magic. And then my brother came out with Vendilion Click as his commander
Oh
with
no.
30 something counter spells and all instant speed. And we played a few games against each other, and we're like, hey, I think we're missing the point here. Like this is not how it's supposed to be.
Guys, why isn't this fun? I don't understand. Oh my God. That must have been, that's like the worst possible way you could.
And it was still fun for us in our own kind of
Sure. Like
masochistic way. But you
Singleton
know,
Legacy, basically.
yeah, I sort of got the appreciation that this is like meant to be approached from a different angle. You know what I mean?
Oh my god. I don't know that I could sculpt a worse way to get into EDH than that. Braids. There's a reason why Braids is banned, man. That card is
Mhm.
miserable from the command zone. Being able to just abyss someone. I mean, basically say like nobody gets to play ever again.
Yep, yep, yep.
Um, One day I would like to. I would love. I think it would be really fun to sit down with you and play actual EDH with like one of these new precons that are more balanced. They're more competitive and very fun, and they're also
Yeah,
kind of at a power level that's easier to manipulate, or rather
yeah.
easier to deal with.
I love the idea of, well, I'll just say like flat out, I love Commander. It's awesome. Sometimes I find like building and maintaining a deck to be like a little bit tricky or intimidating, but
Sure.
the gameplay is just un unequivocally like awesome. You know, like
Yeah.
you get all these really interesting combinations of cards, and every game is different. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just totally awesome. So I've always had fun, like whether it's playing with my own deck or borrowing somebody's deck, or I've played Brawl or the pre-constructed decks.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff.
I think that if you're a Magic fan at a certain level, any Magic is going to be fun Magic for you,
Yep,
right? Like it's
totally
Magic.
agree.
What's wrong with that? Let's play Chaos Draft. Let's go. It'll be great. Um, have you tried mystery boosters?
Yeah, I like that stuff, and mystery boosters and chaos drafts. We
Because
had one really fun event at my local store where it was a sealed deck, but the event started by everyone drafted the booster
ooh,
packs, like the sets that they wanted to use
oh,
for
that's
sealed
sweet.
deck. So it was like, probably Modern Horizons went like first pick or whatever. Um, but yeah, that was good fun. And if you ever get to play an event like that, one secret is that some of the older core sets, like fourth edition, it has like Fireball,
Yeah, right.
Disintegrate, Lightning Bolt, all at common. So like sometimes you can get really good stuff if you play with
I mean,
those
people
old
always
sets.
poo-poo decks like I mean packs like M10, M11, M12, but I'm like, dude, that thing's got Doomblade in it. It's got
Yeah,
like
totally.
Bolt. It's got cards that you need to make a deck work. And they're all like common, and it's ridiculous. I don't know why, but yeah. So, what have you been thinking about Magic lately? What do you think? Like, how do you think the game is looking right now? Like, what is your idea of how Magic is going?
Um, yeah, I think like there's a lot of upside. There's a lot of things to be really excited about. I love that Arena has reached like a new audience of players that maybe wouldn't have gotten into tabletop Magic and weren't being served very well by Magic Online. I know
Mm,
that when Arena became big, I had a lot of friends who like I had played with them as kids, and
mm,
they sort of like trailed off with Magic, but they got back into it with Arena, and that's like the dream
right?
for a lifestyle game like Magic, is to rekindle the interest of people who had played in the old days. So Arena's great. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on with the older formats. The limited sets have been really fun lately, and yeah, I would say like just on my wish list would be some kind of robust like organized play system where people have opportunities to play when they want to play.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's weird because like it feels like Magic has been focusing more on my type of player than your type of player. So I'm having a great time, but also I'm just worried sometimes that like we end up with companions in Magic that's weird for like professionals to just break in half. But that is a problem for somebody else because I don't balance cards very well. Um, but man, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been lovely, and I've been really uh, excited to talk to you for a long time. So, if people wanted to come and check your stuff out, where could they go?
Well, all of my like written and video content goes up on the channelfireball.com website.
Hmm.
And I also stream on twitch.tv/readerrabbit.
How often do you stream?
Well, I've had a little bit of a hiatus, in part because I moved recently. I
Mm,
moved last month. but
Nice.
I'm hoping to get back on a somewhat normal schedule. And Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are the days that I try to be there as often as possible.
Cool.
Um,
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna reciprocate your words. Say thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and
Yeah,
yeah, thanks.
it's
Thanks
awesome,
very
man.
much.
I've been a big fan for a very long time. Um, was there something I was in the middle of asking that I thought about? What the hell was it? Oh gosh, yeah, because like, oh yeah, that's what it is. A few years ago, probably like 5 years ago now, maybe even longer, you did a full level one series for Wizard of the Coast on like how to play Magic, how to build your deck, how to like approach limited, and all these things, like an entire introductory series. And that was still remains one of the best like article series I think I've read on how to like teach yourself how to play Magic. And I still think it holds up really well. And I suggest folks check it out. It was on Wizard for a long time. I think it's still there, but it was
Yeah,
really
thank you
really
so
cool.
much. That's work that that I really put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, and I'm quite proud of. A lot of Magic content is about like, oh, what's the hot deck of the week, or how do you pick your
Yeah,
sideboard card or whatever. But that level one column was designed to stand the test of time and be relevant. And I think there is still a lot of stuff in there that's relevant.
yeah.
Yeah, you
Cause
can
like,
access that through the Wizards website, and at least at some point they had it under the resources that you could click through
mm,
on MTG Arena's homepage. So
yeah.
that's
I mean,
that's
we
good
should
stuff.
you should like do a refresh of that for CFP or something. Just like because a lot of the examples are using, I think, cards from Theros or whatever.
Right.
So, but it's still though it's a fundamentally good bread and butter introduction to Magic. And one of the things that I, especially on a show called Casual Magic, like to harp on is that there's always new people coming into the game. There's always people who are trying to learn. And it's weird to think about somebody who might have picked up Magic in the pandemic on Arena with a Coria of all sets. Like the sets have not been very good introductory ground level sets. And I think resources like your article column were very, very good for the helping people understand that.
Well, yeah. Thanks for saying so. It sort of circles back to your story from the start of our show, where um, like correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if you ever had aspirations of being like a top level hyper competitive like professional player, but you seem to still have a good experience of like learning about these fundamentals
Yeah,
and honing your craft and kind of growing as a player. And I think that
exactly.
stuff's worthwhile for folks of any experience level, or any goals within the world of Magic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like to tell people is that, look, I'm a casual player. I like to play for fun. I like to play where it doesn't matter who won, as long as our experience and our shared, like our shared time together was worth it. But at the same time, I'm a Magic player. I love limited. I love sealed. I love playing, arena all the time. And I mean, I listen to limited resources for God's sakes. Um, the big part is that I think we can all learn from other watching other versions of Magic be played on how to make ourselves better players, how to be more focused, more disciplined. Not necessarily to win. I mean, that's cool too. If you want to go and become a tournament like stalwart, do it. I've tried, but that's just not the mentality I have. I don't have the I don't want to sit and play one deck all day. I would rather
Hmm.
have a whole case full of decks I can pull out at my leisure. Um, but it's still worthwhile to sit and just learn how to do this just because you don't want the playing of the game to get in the way of the experience of the game that you're having, right? Like you don't want to be so worried that you're making misplays or you're just like drawing wrong that you get sucked up into the minutia of the actual playing of the game and lose track of the fact that you're just enjoying yourself and playing the game. So I think it's worthwhile to spend some time to actually learn how to do it. And people like to be like, "Oh, Shivam, you're just a casual scrub. You don't know how to play Magic." I'm like, I'm better than like 80% of Magic players. I'm pretty good at this game, but I choose to use my powers to play scrub tier casual. So,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of times I refer to that as sort of like quote unquote being in shape when it comes to
yeah,
Magic. Like when you know the rules and you're pretty sharp in terms of like tapping your mana and doing the basics and your combat math, like mental energy that you save that now gets to be spent on the really cool stuff, right? Like
Right.
the deck building and the fun interactions and the assembling
Exactly.
combos, and I think it's all worthwhile stuff.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I mean, I could sit and talk to you all day, and I feel like I have kind of with our random technical errors, but I really appreciate once again you coming on. And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gear Up Where Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold or at Cool Stuff Inc. And remember, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.